Hey everybody, welcome to the Tinnitus Manifesto podcast. My name is Chris Clawson. In this podcast, we look at all things related to musicians and hearing issues. Today, me and my co-host for the show, Nashville audiologist Dr. Rebecca Grome, will get into the physics of sound. Over the next couple episodes, we'll talk about some of the basics, qualities of sound, pitch, volume, harmonics, overtones, resonance, and how all this stuff sort of combines to make speech and music, and how those two things, speech and music, are actually quite different as far as EQing and recording and how we hear sound. I hope you guys enjoy it. Once again, Tinnitus Manifesto podcast, the physics of sound.
I didn't realize it in the time, but the Peter Collins interview was badass. Like,
it was great. Really, it was fun, wasn't it?
Yeah, and like really just cool. Having good information. Of that caliber. Yeah, well, also, it's just so it's so abnormal for someone of his stature to say, right, I have this issue and I had this problem and I'm dealing with it, and that's okay. It
was cool. Yeah,
super cool.
It was really nice of him to do that. I agree. I think for disclaimers, if we end up using this in the audio, I made it clear to him before the interview, he didn't have to bring any of that stuff. If he didn't want to talk about his hearing aid or whatever, I wasn't going to, that wasn't going to be a part of the conversation. He was happy to offer it up, which I think was really cool.
Yeah.
Well, cool. We're here starting into this conversation essentially for the next, it'll probably be a few episodes, I think, because we got a lot of shit here. But just sort of the physics of sound, and just so we can see how it sort of applies to our daily life and how it applies to musicians and all this kind of stuff, some of the, the more technical stuff for, sound, frequency, harmonics, volume, all these things. What do those things really mean, and how do they apply to, how we hear sounds in music? So right off the bat, I'm going to ask you a question as the audiologist. What is sound? What is the definition of sound? What does it mean?
So sound to me is a physical movement in the air, which is picked up by the ear and then transferred up to the brain.
Okay. So it's different. So, and I'm asking that question right off partially because it's almost the tree in the forest, right? If a tree lands, is it set, and they say, well, there's misquotes. Did anybody hear it? That's not the question. Did it make a sound? Now, if there's no ear picking up, if there's no receiver or no insect, no anything that hears that tree fall, that means it's not sound?
No, it's true. There's sound on that.
That's what I mean. That's, again, I don't mean to be like sort of a dick about it, but just to, kind of clarify.
Are you sure about that, yoga, Chris?
It's kind of part of my job here. Yeah, but you know what I mean? Like, it's a question I've had. I was wondering, like, what is essentially, that's why I'm asking, what is sound essentially? Like, it's air pressure. It's change of air pressure.
It's a change in air pressure. Mm-hmm.
Right. And the speed of sound, it travels at whatever, 767, right? 767 miles per hour.
Around there.
1,200 kilometers, something like that. Now, when it travels through something more solid, it's faster, right? So if it goes to water, it goes like 5 times faster.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's because the molecules that make up water, or the molecules that make up a solid structure, are closer together. Yeah. And that's how sound travels. And so
it's more dense, right?
Correct. Yep. So if you talk in air molecules have a certain amount of spacing around them. Whereas if you talk underwater, that spacing is closer together. If you scream against a wall, again, if you're on the other side of that wall, it's going to come through there faster.
Right. Yeah. Gotcha. Now, if it's, and then we haven't really gotten into the anatomy of hearing, I thought it was better to get into the physics of sound first, as far as the whole project is concerned. So when it comes to musicians and hearing and that kind of thing, there's some things that really sort of define how we hear things and how things sound to us, right? You have it's frequency, right? That which designates a note. You have harmonics, which are the resonant notes that come off of the frequency fundamental frequency, right? And then you also have volume, which is sort of amplitude or loudness, right? So and it's sort of the combination of those three that kind of make almost every sound what it is, right? It makes this really it defines each sound to some extent. So let's So now let's move on and just sort of define what frequency is, what it means, and how it applies to us as human beings and how we hear.
I think it's important to make sure we talk all the different terms that you can use for frequency, because I think I've said before, audiologists and musicians sometimes speak technically the same language, but maybe different dialects of that language.
Yes, right.
And I find that when I talk to patients in the office, whether or not they're musicians. So when we are saying frequency, we are talking about a sine wave and how close together that sine wave is. So frequency can be frequency, pitch, tone,
right.
Channel is another, channel or band. When we talk about your EQ, that's another one where people are technically referencing frequency.
So you're talking about hertz as well, right?
Hertz, yeah.
Cycles per second, CPS.
Yeah,
Right.
All of that.
All
stuff.
those things
it
are
all
different
falls
words.
Into what
Essentially
a hertz
the
is.
same thing.
Correct.
Which is what? It is, like you said, the amount of cycles of vibration
per minute
in 1 second. Right.
Sorry.
That's essentially what it is. So,
yes.
If it's 1 cycle full, like, and again, if you're seeing the video, you can see it's not just an up arc, it's a whole up and down arc, right? You have the up and bottom. And how many of those full waves are contained in 1 second defines frequency.
Correct.
Right? Cool.
Yep.
Okay.
So if you're talking about pure tones, playing piano, going up the keys, each one of those is a pure tone note.
Yes. Right. And we will get into the complexity of when harmonics come into that, but essentially this is true. And this is where this is where I think, in particular musicians who are experimenting with their hearing or trying to learn about their hearing, a piano is just a great way to do it to start, right?
Yeah.
Because every note is a frequency, is a hertz level, is a cycles per second, right?
Correct.
Is all those things, is a tone, right?
Yep.
Again, so that's part of it too, just getting that language to kind of meet and agree between the science and the music of it right there.
And it's really interesting when patients come into my office, those who are musicians typically say, I think I'm good until about, 2,500 hertz. And then, things kind of get quiet after that. Or I think things are pretty good until about 12,000 hertz. And then after that, I think it rolls off.
Right.
Whereas general population comes in and they're like, yeah, sometimes in the higher range, I don't hear as well.
Yes, especially if you have sound engineers or any musician cares about the sound of their instrument, right? They're going to learn at least to some extent the range and what they hear and what they're missing and that kind of thing. That's got to be a little bit easier for you, right? And for the musician. So chances are the musician they can just get to the piano and go, okay, well, we're looking at these C6, C7, something between C6 and C7 for, going to the 2000 range, 2000 to 3000. And you can see if there's just a little drop in what you're hearing. You see if there's a little changes.
So, I think this is a good time to kind of jump into anatomy, just basics.
Yeah, do it.
So when we're talking about anatomy, the easiest way to talk about anatomy when it comes to hearing is when the sound comes into the ear. When it's activated in the cochlea is that snail shell figure on the inner ear portion. And that is arranged from high pitch at the base, all the way up low pitch at the apex. So think of it like unrolling a piano and then rolling it back up high or low pitch to high pitch with everything has to pass the high pitches first.
Yes.
So there's a bunch of hair cells in there floating around. Just think each one is attached to a different pitch or a different tone.
Right.
That's the easiest way to think about it.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful way to think about it. And again, for musicians, if you haven't thought of it this way, you're probably going, holy shit. Yeah, this makes perfect sense. I understand a little bit of how the snail shell works, that cochlea works. And that's exactly it. If you unrolled that snail shell, you would be going from high pitch to low, right?
Yep. Yep, absolutely. And so that's actually a fun fact. That's actually why high-pitched hearing loss is more common than low-frequency hearing loss, is because all of those waves have to go across those high frequencies before they get to the low frequencies.
Yes.
So only the bigger waves actually get down in there.
Yep. Exactly. And that is why those high frequencies are much more likely
Prone
to get
to,
damaged, much more exposed. Right.
yeah.
Right.
And that's why we have presbycusis, which is standard. It's technically hearing loss due to aging. I don't like that. I like to
Right.
say hearing
Right.
loss due to life. Could be a lot of
Yeah.
different things.
Well,
So,
and again, I mean, it's sometimes for those of us younger who aren't quite old, but have the, that what they would call age related, it doesn't bother me as much, I think, for some strange reason. I just, like, well, uh, I know it's not age related, so whatever, you can call
correct.
it that.
Yeah.
So, okay, and we can talk back to music a little bit, in terms of sort of the fundamental of the note. So A440 is a common note. Almost every musician knows A440. It's on their tuner, right?
Hmm.
And that's the A above C, middle C, right? Now, if you go an octave up, you're just doubling those numbers, right?
Correct. You're
So
doubling the hertz.
you're doubling the hertz. So if 440 is A4, 880 is
A5.
A5, and you work your way up, doubling the frequency each time,
Hmm.
which is a nice quick way of getting an idea of range for me. I just thought, okay, well, if I can get one, at least I can multiply and find those octaves above just, when I need to.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't have to remember each one. You can remember just the middle octave, get a rough idea of what all those are, and then you can do the multiples or divide. That's my world, whatever.
Hmm.
Uh, and I do find it helpful. And again, as we had in last time I saw you, we're messing around with that. We're playing now with that one note and seeing if I can figure out a way to kind of guide that in a little bit. We'll
Was
see
that
how it goes.
1300 hertz? It was between
That
1
was the
and
13.
1500, right?
Yeah, I think it's right around a high 13, maybe almost 14, something like that.
Yeah.
I'll have to double check it, but it's that F, I do know it's in that range. It's E,
Yeah.
F, and F sharp, right in that range there, that it jumps up. It
Yeah.
sounds like the intonation moves up about almost a half step
Yeah.
in some areas. And it
Yeah. And
changes
so,
almost day to day. It's weird.
yeah. And so for people who are listening, that's one thing that is tricky when we go to talk about treatment or remediation or hearing aids or whatever,
Right.
is because depending on the channel or the band that's available in that brand of hearing aid that you're wearing, Chris, specifically for you, I don't have the ability to go in and
And get that
change
specific.
1300 hertz.
Yeah.
I can change 1000 hertz and I can change 1500 hertz
Right. Right.
and I can change
Exactly.
it for a 50 gain sound and I can change it for an 80 gain sound.
Right.
But
But you
I
can't
can't
zero
change.
in.
Yeah,
Right. But
I
some
can't change that.
hearing aids, you might be able to do that more. Like it depends on the brand. It
On the
depends.
brand. Yeah, some
Right.
brands give you more channels and bands to play with.
Yeah. Right.
And the only real, in the software, I can say, oh, I want to increase or decrease this by 1, 3, 1, 2, 3 dB, whatever.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily mean that's what's actually happening in your ear canal.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
there's
Exactly.
some nuanced things there you got to think about. But
So getting back to just frequency in general, what is the range of human hearing, and how does it change over time?
yeah,
Rough.
so when you're born, usually it's 20 hertz all the way up to 20,000 hertz.
Okay.
And then as you age, that number squeezes down a bit.
Right.
So
Right.
most adults with quote unquote normal hearing really can only hear out to about 10,000 hertz.
Okay. So now we can get into this too. This is something that I've always known, but hadn't really digested what it means in a lot of ways, which is that back to the piano, strictly speaking, the piano only goes up, if we're talking fundamentals, only goes up to 41, 4200, right? To that
Correct.
super top C. And it's interesting. I've been experimenting with friends hitting, we'll just go up and hit that top C and see if we can identify it. Because some people can't. It just sounds like a plank and something high, and it depends on which set of hearing aids I'm wearing. I
Yeah.
can the set the good set. I can totally identify that note, which is really pretty freaking cool, because a lot of people I know can't. I'm like, wow,
Correct.
you can't? Wow. I got a
With
guy
they
kinda
can
cool.
do it with hearing aids, or they can do it with hearing aids,
They're, just
or just
normal
normal
people
hearing.
with normal hearing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or, non-aided friends.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to talk about if we're going to talk about, the top of the piano, because especially if it's going to be around 4,000 hertz, we
Right.
could get all nerdy about this conversation.
Yeah. And that's
Um,
the thing. And we might let's hold that thought. Maybe we can start getting nerdy when we start adding things like harmonics and stuff, because that
yeah.
changes everything. Right.
Correct.
But that's the thing that I think is amazing to me, is I always forget, like, you would assume that the frequencies would go much higher than they do, considering how much our hearing range is and how much we think. And again, you saying, well, by the time you're an adult, you have lost half of your hearing range. Oh my God. Wow. But that's not
Yeah.
really it though, right? Because it's higher multiples of frequency. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not like you're losing 50% of your hearing. That's not what's happening.
Yeah.
It's a
You're not
different thing.
cutting your hearing in half.
You are
You're
not
just
cutting.
you're cutting a
Precisely.
lot of your sensitivity out.
Yes. Right.
That's
Right.
that's how I would explain that, is you're
Okay.
not cutting your hearing in half by coming down to 10,000 hertz. You're just cutting your awareness and sensitivity to sound as you
Okay.
age. Yeah.
So we have peaks in our hearing, right? We have areas where we're more sensitive than other areas as far as what frequencies we hear by nature.
Correct.
So in general, we hear roughly better, mostly between 300 and 5,000 hertz. That's sort of the communication range, and
Correct.
is that correct?
Yeah. So the bulk of communication and speech understanding
Yes.
is going to be roughly, 1,000 up to about 5,000 hertz.
Okay. Average male speech, my voice, is somewhere in the 100 hertz range. Yours
Hmm.
is somewhere about double that, an octave above, as we know, so like 200, something like that. When you're born, you can hear up to 20,000 hertz, but a piccolo only goes up to almost 4,000 hertz. Hardly. A piano only goes up to 4,200 hertz. So we
Hmm.
have all this extra range that's way up there. We do lose it, over like essentially half the frequency, not half of sound, as we agreed.
Yeah.
So much of what we hear is not just a fundamental sound. And this is what we know of as what they call overtones or harmonics, right?
Correct. Yeah. Because usually people aren't describing, when they're talking about an issue or talking about a problem that they have, which is they come to see me because they're having problems.
Right.
They're not talking about the sound source. They're talking about how they're perceiving that sound source.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, and it's up to you to translate that language into something that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
And again, back to musicians, where they generally have a little bit more of a grasp of some of the stuff we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Right. And with that in mind, the harmonics, the word itself implies that things are harmonizing off of each other. Right. So
Correct.
that's why you get those more resonant frequencies with harmonics, as opposed to, say, with overtones, which are more clashy. The math doesn't work, strictly speaking, with overtones compared to harmonics.
Correct.
It was a big discovery for me when I got this newest set of hearing aids. I could hear more upper frequency from it. And as I always do, and as any musician I'm sure does, or anyone who's into music and gets some kind of hearing aid or gets new devices, they want to test it out. You're putting your new headphones even, right? You put them on, you listen to music that you know and love, and hear, see if you can notice any improvements or changes. And I put on, it was one of the Pink Floyd albums. It was either Wish You Were Here or I think it was Wish You Were Here. And there was a tenor sax solo. And what I discovered is how complex the sound of the saxophone really is, and how almost it resembles more of a human because of all the layers of frequency. It's not a pure tone. Sax is, compared to other, like compared to flute, say, which is a straight line, and clarinet, which are straight, the bend and the change in the bell shape of the saxophone.
Right.
Makes it more complex. So I was hearing the complexity of frequencies. It really blew my mind. I heard it it sounded to me like I hadn't heard it in ages, or I'd forgotten like my God, I forgot a saxophone sounded so complex, so rich. It was really neat. And that's one of the things that each instrument has. Harmonics is something more musical to some extent, more resonant, whereas overtones, and we can talk about the just a little bit of a difference there. Overtones are really important, right? They're important for communication. Overtones are the clashing, more harsh, all that stuff are overtones hitting each other, right? Whereas the more fluid sound, the notes are more harmonics resonating. So the two combined, especially with communication, you need both, right?
We have to separate when we're talking about music and we're talking about hearing speech.
Yes.
Because music is a combination of pure tone notes or pitches.
Right.
Speech
is
a very complex signal.
Yes.
Because as it comes from your lungs, up your throat and out your mouth, it's very rarely, if ever, a pure tone matched with another pure tone to make a sound.
Totally. Right.
Yeah. Yes. So think of it like white noise even. Yeah. White noise is a static still combination of pure tones.
Yes.
Whereas speech is a very, very different complex signal.
Right. So, right. Layers of sound. And this is one thing, someone like me who wants to be able to hear music, they want it the way they want to hear it, and hear speech the way they want to hear it, right? So I have two very distinct settings, and I know most musicians I know who do this, who wear hearing aids, they kind of do the same thing. They have their music set up, and then they have their, out in life talking, dealing with people set up. For those of you out there, those musicians who are, getting into that kind of thing, that's something you'll want to bother your audiologist about.
Yeah, two different goals here. I actually just had someone in this week who I'm trying to think, they sat down, musician, right, and same thing. I said, I think my wife's getting after me, I can't hear. I think I lose my hearing somewhere around 3,000 hertz. And I'm like, okay, great. Let's see where you are. And we go through it. Definitely has hearing loss. Definitely has enough hearing loss. Recommending hearing aids.
Right.
And he's like, do you think I really need them? And I said, well, number one, you're sitting in my seat, so you put the time and effort to schedule an appointment and right, pay me for my opinion. Right. And second of all, when you sat down, you told me, number one, you're having problems with your wife. You told me another example that you were having problems with. And you told me that you had hearing loss after 3,000 hertz.
Right.
So, yeah, I do. And the first thing out of his mouth was, how's music going to sound to me? And I'm like, when you listen to music or when you are communicating with your family, because we have to separate that concept. And I think a lot of people don't think of that, and they think, oh, they're, as a musician, they're always like, oh my gosh, this is going to mess with how I hear things. This is going to mess with music. How am I going to wear these on stage? You're not. Right. You're not going to wear this on stage. You're going to wear your musician products for stage. You're going to wear your in-ear monitors and your filtered earplugs, and you're going to be listening to your feed.
Yes. Right.
Hearing aids are for communication. I hope you can go to a concert with hearing aids on and enjoy it. That would be a great, great achievement. But the goal is communication.
Right. And some musicians might debate that choice, which their priority might be.
Yeah, and if that's their priority, that's fine. Just tell me ahead of time.
They think it's one or the other, but you have to remind them, in fact, no, we can get another setting for you. And this is what we're going to have to do. And I find, and again, this is whether it's in-ear monitors or hearing aid, or even just testing your new studio monitors, right? There's adjustments and all that kind of thing that's going to happen anyway. Right.
Yeah. You essentially have to retrain your brain to accept
right.
the complex signal that you're pushing up there.
Right. And again, having different settings for those of us who are trying to use it for music. And that's absolutely true. For when things are different now, but for most of the time when I was playing live, I would take my hearing aid out and usually and put put protection in, because I just wanted to save what I had left. Right. And that was the goal more than anything else, just trying to make sure I didn't lose more while I was doing this thing that I love. And that's of course the number one priority, and that's your priority as well, which is why you're trying to save, your priority is communication, right? Keeping people connected that way. And protecting hearing for when it comes to music.
Correct. We have a lot of different, I personally have a lot of different goals as an audiologist.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah.
It's education, number one, how to prevent hearing loss.
Right.
And number two, awareness. Awareness is always, if you don't know, then you don't know. I'd rather people listen to this podcast or come in and see a professional than to Google hearing loss and tinnitus.
Right.
And then three is treatment. And treatment is not how I can get you to wear your hearing aids. It's when you wear your hearing aids, are you able to connect with your loved ones? Straight up. Are you able to function better in life?
Yeah, that's exactly. Are you, just normal communication, normal talking. Are you able to just kind of, right.
Well, I think I was thinking about something when you said that earlier about music versus speech, and it hit me because you're talking
sometimes
about
a musician might decide that music is more important than speech.
Yes, and I completely understand that. You said when you played live, you would take your hearing aids out.
Yes.
Why did you do that?
Because I wanted to save what I had. What little what hearing I had left. I didn't want to burn out whatever few frequencies up there I had by having to blare out. And I would always put something. I used kind of whatever the levelized level, even cut.
So do you think, and I think this is a common misconception, do you think your hearing aids would have been amplifying that loud of a sound?
I don't know. I think it depends on the type. I think part of it too, like compared, like the setup I'm wearing now, the setup I've had, the two most recent setups I've had, I don't have an issue. I walk into a bar, I don't worry about changing anything.
Yeah.
The older one I had was open dome. We can get into that stuff later, some future time. But I was more concerned about my hearing because of that.
Yeah.
So
because you're closed off more right now with your ear
now. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
So
it's not a concern now. When I walk in, like I said, I walk into a bar, I don't really change anything. I might turn the volume down a teeny bit, but it does it itself. It's fine.
Yeah. So I think it's important because there's a few different things here. Number one, we're just talking about harmonics.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of musicians, when we're talking about hearing aids and whatnot, and they want to listen to music and it doesn't sound right, we need to talk about resonance.
Yeah.
Resonance kind of goes hand in hand with harmonics, right?
Yeah, right.
And your resonant peak of your ear canal usually is around 2,500 hertz. Usually.
Okay. Just anatomically speaking.
Anatomically speaking. So like KEMAR is our dummy that we run all of our hearing aid research on. Not me. I don't like research. Right, but the hearing aid manufacturers run all the research on KEMAR, and it's the anatomically average person.
Okay.
And so that usually is around 2,500, 2,700 hertz. If you have a smaller ear canal.
We talked about this, right? For me, I think I have a lower resonance because my ear canal's a little narrower.
So smaller ear canal, things grow louder. So you have a smaller ear canal means higher resonance.
Oh, okay.
Bigger ear canal means lower resonance.
Gotcha.
So when you're talking about sound and harmonics, you have to talk about how sound is bouncing around in a space.
In the ear canal itself.
In the ear canal itself. And so you're talking about how your old pair, you had an open dome.
Mm-hmm.
And you were worried that all the external sound would come in there.
Yes.
Now you have a closed scenario.
Right.
And you're not as worried about all that external sound bleeding in there.
Yes.
That right there is why musicians don't like hearing aids for music.
Oh, yeah.
Because you get a huge, depending on what you're wearing,
right.
If you have an open dome, your ear canal resonance might change.
Yes.
versus if you have a closed dome. So you might get a really strong 2 to 4K boost naturally listening to music if you have a
Right.
hearing aid on.
Yeah. Open dome.
Yeah.
Right. And then if it's closed dome, okay, so I guess we got to go there. Open dome and closed dome. Open dome means yes, you were getting sound from outside.
Yeah.
You're not sealing off the entire ear canal, right?
Correct.
You're allowing sound from outside to come in. You're just boosting other extra frequencies in there.
Correct.
With a closed dome, it is all frequencies are coming in through the speaker.
You get
All sound.
you get a certain
your ear
more.
canal is blocked off. Now,
Correct.
for those who have in-ear monitors, theirs is more like a closed dome system, correct?
It depends on the brand. So yes, if you have a really nice seal, you're going to get roughly 30 dB of noise reduction with a really nice seal on an in-ear monitor.
Right. Okay. So yeah. Okay. Theoretically, that's the goal, is to try a good in-ear monitor.
A good seal on an in-ear monitor, 30 dB.
Right. Okay.
If you're acrylic, it's going to be lower. If you're silicone, you might be a little higher. Just depends on the fit.
Gotcha.
But there's a lot of brands out there that build in the active ambient vents.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Where you can vent your in-ear
external sound.
So you don't feel
you can
so
open it up and
head.
get real natural sound, not synthesized sound.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, and of course, someone who has in-ear monitors would probably like to have that, right? That's, having that control is important, right? And I guess this is my point. And we've talked a little bit about this, the hearing aids that I wore, anyone switching to a closed dome hearing aid, it's going to be kind of a tough thing to do. If you've been going, open dome or whatever, I'll speak from or at least in my experience, because suddenly it sounds like everything is, which
digital.
it is coming from it's coming from the speaker, you're not hearing natural sound.
Correct.
And so the sound sounds like it's actually coming into your head. It's not coming from outside. You don't get, directional hearing gets really kind of screwed up, all that stuff. It's like wearing a great set of hearing, like great set of headphones, essentially, for the world, which is, sure, okay, but I'd rather listen to the world without them.
Yeah.
So that, in my mind, and I think that's a big adjustment for people when they're switching to in-ear monitors, that if they don't have that ability to get some of that external sound, they don't like it because they sound isolated, because they sound separated, right?
Yeah. Yep. We can get off topic pretty easily.
Yeah, I know. I'm bringing it back. So this seems like a good place to end part 1 of the physics of sound. We hope you enjoyed it and that you'll stick around for part 2. We've got so many great topics and guests coming up in future episodes. My hope is that by the time you hear this podcast, we'll also have the website up at tinnitusmanifesto.com, and we'll be connected to all the social media. As of right now, you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and if you have any questions, comments, or ideas, you can reach us at the tinnitusmanifesto@gmail.com. Thanks, y'all, and don't burn those cochlear hairs.